next, when hot coals were placed on top of the bowl. This not only burned the victim, but made life inside that bowl unbearable for the rats. Where to go when there is no escape?
The Dark Ages are referred to as the Dark Ages for a reason, and you'll get to know why based on this list.
From sick and twisted methods of torture to terrible diseases. Let's talk about these and more only in today's video. Top 10 true scary stories from the Dark Ages, part 3.
But wait a minute. Before we begin, Lindsay, don't you have some exciting news to share with the class?
I indeed do! So if you all haven't heard, I have started my very own reaction channel called Peach. It's starring me, myself, and I promise it's gonna be a great time.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. I'm so excited. Please check the link in the description to subscribe to Lindsay's channel, Peach.
With that being said, let's dive on into the video. Starting off this countdown, we have the Spanish donkey. During the Dark Ages, it seemed like people loved extreme methods of torture / execution. I mean, the victims didn't love it, but the executioners and people of power certainly had fun with these disturbing contraptions, like the Spanish donkey, otherwise known as the wooden horse. This device consisted of angled pieces of wood with sharp points attached to it. The victim was then forced to mount this naked, as if they were riding a horse. The sharp points would dig into their bare flesh. Sometimes weights were even added to the victim's feet to force them down more onto the spikes. Apparently, there are accounts of the wedges slicing entirely through the victim. Yikes, that would be extremely painful.
Coming in at number 9, but before I reveal it, be sure to press that like button for us and be sure to subscribe for more because you know you love it. Coming in at number 9, we have Pope Stephen VI, who dug up his enemy and put him on trial. This isn't terrifying in the traditional slasher gore horror sense, but more in the what in the actual heck was this guy thinking so ridiculous it's terrifying kind of way. The trial was called the Cadaver Synod or Synodus Horrenda and took place at the Basilica San Giovanni Laterano. Pope Stephen VI put the rotting corpse of Pope Formosus on trial in 897. The trial consisted mainly of Pope Stephen just yelling insults and accusations at him while the jury watched in horror. They also dressed the deceased Formosus in papal garments, chopped off his 3 fingers on his hands, so these ones used for blessing, threw him in a river, and then burned his body. I mean, thank goodness the guy was already dead. Many believe that the trial was used mainly as a distraction from the horrors that Pope Stephen himself committed, adding on the fact that he was most likely insane. The people of Rome who followed Formosus then had Stephen incarcerated and strangled. I don't know, I guess that's what you get for killing a dead guy.
Moving on to number 8, we have the sleeping sickness. So in 1453, King Henry VI became mysteriously ill for 18 months. Some historians think the sickness that he was suffering from was catatonic schizophrenia, whereas others believe he was just going through a mental breakdown. We don't know for sure, but what he went through was quite strange. They called it the sleeping sickness. Basically, he slipped into an unresponsive state for a year and a half. He woke up and started behaving like a child. From then, he would often slip into an unresponsive state periodically for the rest of his life. Not only that, but he started to suffer physically as well. At one point, he couldn't move his limbs or support the weight of his own head. He would often be in a slouched over position. Again, we truly don't know what went on with him.
Next up at number 7, we have Mob Ball. Who doesn't love a bit of soccer, or football as the folks across the pond call it? Well, Mob Ball was pretty similar as far as game structures go. The ball was a leather bladder, and the goals were set at random distances apart, sometimes even miles apart. Anyone can join in, and there were no limits to how many players could try their hand at striking at the net. FIFA says the game started around the 8th century, and though it sounds innocent enough, it actually turns out there was a darker beginning to the whole thing. Before they had thought to use a liver, some stories say that the head of a Danish prince was once used. Guess they got, get your head in the game. Gotta get your head in the game.
Making our way down the list at number 6, we have the tuberculosis. Did you know back in the days, the touch of a king or queen was powerful enough to cure deadly diseases? Or so that's what they believed. Back in the day, a form of tuberculosis left a number of people with black lesions all over their neck. These would then rupture and leave nasty open sores. Well, it was believed that the touch of a king or queen would cure it all. It's believed that King Henry VI touched around 1,500 people. That sounds bad, but touched the illnesses, the disease, you know? Anyway, yet it's unknown how many people he actually cured with his magic touch. I can't imagine it was a lot though.
Next up, we have some good old-fashioned witch hunting at number 5. Ironically, Pope Innocent VIII kicked it all off by putting forth a bill in 1484 that condemned witchcraft and sent inquisitors to Germany to try witches. He reportedly blamed them for the mini ice age and inclement weather that was occurring around that time. And we all know what happened to any who were found guilty. But the weird part is, despite the religiosity that hung in the air as thick as dense smoke around that time, many people were pretty skeptical of the existence of witches anyways. John of Salisbury even said in 1159, and I quote, "Who is so blind as not to see that this is all a mischievous illusion caused by demons? This is shown, if by nothing else, by the fact that it is always the simpler men and women and those less firm in the faith that believe these things." End quote. Though a couple centuries earlier, this certainly sounds like it definitely applies to Pope Not So Innocent VIII.
And at number 4, we have the breaking wheel. Another really messed up form of torture. This device was typically used during public executions. Basically, this device is like a wagon wheel with spokes. The victim was then strapped onto the wheel so that their limbs were woven between the spokes. Then the executioner would take a hammer and smash the victim's limbs. When they were hit, their limbs would give away and break due to how they were strapped onto the wheel. In other cases, the victim would be tied onto the outside of the wheel while their feet were tied to the ground. Then they would turn the wheel until their body breaks. It was very gruesome. And then their dead body was held up for everyone to see. How sick.
Next up, we have tithing. You think taxes are bad now? Well, at least the ones we pay in Canada help afford us some healthcare that won't kill us, which is a good thing. Tithes were taxes that you had to pay to the church either in actual gold or as part of your harvest. Tithe, meaning 1/10, meant that the church got around 10% of whatever you made. The bishops and priests had massive barns where they kept the tithes, and if you didn't pay it, then you would be excommunicated. Anyone who was excommunicated was left out in the cold to suffer and starve, and no one was allowed to speak to them. In a lot of ways, excommunication was worse than death, as everyone believed that if you couldn't go to church to confess your sins, you would be condemned to hell or purgatory, which was an awful thing to do.
Coming in at number 2, we have rat torture. And I promise you, it's just as bad as it sounds, if not worse. In fact, it's considered one of history's worst methods of torture. Basically, what would happen is that a rat was placed inside of a cage contraption, which was then hooked onto the victim's stomach. The cage was then slowly heated. The rat would start to panic and try to escape. The only way it could was to burrow through the victim's flesh. And that's what it would do. It would just claw at the victim's stomach and bite until it ends up inside their bowels. It's painful. It's disgusting. It's something straight out of your nightmares.
And last but not least, coming in at number 1, we have the fact that there was absolutely no plumbing. Guys, we were really stinky. If you've ever had a fantasy about being a medieval prince or princess in a castle, maybe pick an era after plumbing was introduced. Trust me, you'd want to stay miles away from that handsome knight who was about 3 more months away from his yearly bath. After the Black Plague, people thought bathing made them sick, so they just didn't do it anymore. They didn't connect the fact that they dumped their business in lakes and rivers where they bathed, so instead they just stopped it all together. On top of that, people used to throw their chamber pots over the balconies onto the streets or into the path of an unfortunate traveler. Very unfortunate. Imagine being pooped on by a bird. This is a lot worse. In fact, courteous men were expected to let women walk on the innermost part of the sidewalk in case anything unpleasant fell on the men. Sorry, you guys. People just let it pile up for weeks until King Edward II said that people were no longer allowed to dump poop in the road. Still, the tradition carried on, and only the wealthy had perfume to mask the smell, so... Alright guys, that's all for today's video. Let us know in the comments below which one of these facts you found the scariest and creepiest and weirdest.
Don't forget to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to Most Amazing Top 10 for more amazing videos. I've been your host, Lindsay Ivan.
I've been your host, Rachel Fisher.
And I'll see you when I see ya. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, she goes, I've been Rachel Fisher, and you put that right in between. You know the drill. That was it. That was fast. That was good.